Are severely struggling with this question and googling it a lot, then you are at right place today. And I promise you that after watching this video, you will not need to google this question again. But for sure you will get lot of other stuff to google up. The dotnet framework is an execution and development platform for building apps for Windows, Windows Phone, Windows Server and Windows Azure. This is a new definition given by Microsoft with .NET Framework 4.5. I know it's difficult to understand for beginner, but believe me, this is the most transparent definition as compared to definitions in earlier versions. Let us try to understand this one-line definition in this entire session. In this session, we are going to discuss these points. Brief history of computing, need of .NET and its important components, compilation model in .NET. We'll also see detailed .NET Framework component stack diagram, which will help you to understand different components of .NET Framework. And in the end, we'll have quick look on different CLR versions and their side-by-side execution. Let us start with history. There is old saying, necessity is mother of invention. I would like to slightly modify it to fit in world of computing. Necessity is mother of evolution. As we humans are trying to communicate with machines since long, when our complexity of applications grows and old language fails to reach the expectation of application and application developer, some new language get evolved to overcome the limitation of precedings. This way, we are continuously evolving from low-level language to high-level languages. Day by day, these languages are getting more powerful, more flexible, and easier. In last 50 years, various programming paradigms are designed and implemented. Hundreds of languages came and gone, but nothing gone west. For example, today no one uses BCPL or B, but we should not forget that they were foundation for C. And from C, languages like C++, then Java, then C# evolved. In short, today we have C# because years ago someone had written BCPL, or before that CPL or APL, or even before that IPL. Every programming language have contributed to process of evolution, and still it's going on and will continue forever. So don't get surprised if tomorrow some other language will get evolved, let's say X#, and while describing the advantages and power of X#, it will list out hundreds of limitations of C# and will convince you how bad C# was. Summary is that there is no black magic in computing. It's all evolution. And .NET is also one of the very important milestones in this process of evolution. Before going in technical details of .NET, I would like to suggest you that ignore marketing hype by Microsoft about .NET, as it can hamper your learning and can confuse you. From very first version, Microsoft is advertising .NET as a platform to develop web services, and now in version 4.5 as a Windows 8 store application development platform. But in reality, these are very small parts of .NET framework. .NET is much more than this. I would also like to answer a few very commonly asked questions which can keep coming in your mind. The very first question is, why .NET evolved? Let us go back in time to understand it in depth. Almost for 40 years of computing, we humans were busy in making our communication stronger with machines. That means in making our programming languages stronger. Result of that, we evolved to strong languages like C, C++ or VB. But at the same time, hardware also evolving. giving various choices of processor. Not only that, but complexity of real-life applications was also growing. To handle such modern application problems like growing complexity and multiple choices of hardware, programmers started expecting two things from programming languages, that is code reusability and platform independence. But traditional languages were not aware of these new challenges. And this triggers Microsoft to design and write such a huge and powerful platform like .NET, which can satisfy all modern requirements and challenges. Why code reusability is that much important? Let us try to understand it using simple example of array. Every developer uses array in day-to-day development. And surprisingly, hundreds of developers who want to sort array end up with writing same code which has been written hundreds of times earlier. That means we are putting thousands of man hours just to write code to sort the array. Sounds strange, but it's true. This was just one example of array, but same is true for other common functionalities. Common sense says that we should figure out all such common functionality, write it once, put it in library, and use it whenever required. This is what reusability is. This will definitely allow application developer to focus on business logic instead of writing same common code again and again. Now let us try to understand second point, that is platform independence. Modern users have multiple choices of hardware and operating system. This brings a new problem to application development. Now applications should have capability to execute on any hardware as well as on any operating system. But traditional languages are not capable of that, as after compilation, they always create binary executable file, generally referred as exe. This binary file is always platform dependent. This means that if developer will compile C code on Windows XP machine with P4 processor, then this exe will contain executable instructions for Windows operating system and optimized for P4 processor. This exe will not give optimum performance on other Windows machine having different processors. And surprisingly, it will not even execute on machine with other operating system like Linux or Mac. Summary is, reusable library and platform independence are the two real inspiration behind .NET framework development. Be aware, platform independence is little tricky term and can easily confuse you, as sometimes it can be used in context of only hardware, sometime in context of operating system, and sometime in context of combinations of hardware, operating system and other software components required for application execution. Just to avoid confusion, here I would like to specify that .NET supports 100% platform independence in context of hardware, but not in context of operating system. .NET program can execute on any hardware with optimum performance, but it needs Windows operating system for execution. It will not execute on Mac OS or Linux. For this, you can use .NET Framework by Mono project. Mono project is cross-platform open source .NET Framework implementation. The second common question is, why .NET is very successful? We know that maturity comes with age and experience teaches lot. Same thing is true in computing. When Microsoft started .NET development, Humans have 40 years of programming experience. Also, .NET Framework is not the first of its type. Standard Template Library, Microsoft Foundation Class Library, Rapid Application Development Environment were some of successful attempts of Microsoft to provide reusable libraries. These libraries were strong enough and lot of application developments is done using these libraries. But they have some limitations like tight coupling with particular language and platform dependency. Still, they have contributed a lot to the process of evolution. Obviously, all this experience played a vital role in .NET framework development. In .NET, Microsoft provided huge library to easy application development. This library is pure object-oriented and more mature than its previous attempts. It is neither tightly coupled with any programming language nor platform dependent. These are some reasons why .NET rocked the decade and still it is evolving and giving new features with every release. The summary is, if necessity is mother of evolution, then experience is father. The next very common question is, what languages can I use to develop .NET applications? Microsoft provides 5 languages. You can use C#, VB.NET, C++.NET, F# or JavaScript to develop your .NET applications. Other than these languages, there are more than 20 third-party languages available, like COBOL.NET, Perl.NET and C#.NET. Point to note that in .NET 4.5, Microsoft discontinued support for G#. And the last question that I would like to discuss over here is, what types of applications can I develop in .NET? In .NET you can develop console applications, desktop applications, web applications, Windows services, WinStore applications, and smart device applications. Console applications are command line applications which can be called and executed through DOS prompt. Generally, administrative tools are created as a console application. Console applications are always faster than GUI applications as there are no overheads of GUI processing. Windows services are the processes which starts automatically as computer boots. It keeps executing in background and stops when computer shut down. SQL Server services, Windows Firewall services are some examples of Windows services. You can write Windows services when you want to execute something continuously in background. Desktop applications, also referred as client applications, are the applications which you need to install on end user's computer. Typically, they are Windows applications. Some very common examples are Microsoft Word, Outlook, Calculator, and all. You can develop classic desktop applications using WinForms and rich desktop applications with advanced visual effects, shadows, animations, vector-based image processing using WPF. Web applications are the applications that executes on web server and they need not to install on client's machine. End user access web applications through browser over the internet or intranet. That's why they are also known as server application. Some of very well-known examples are Gmail, Facebook and eBay. Web services also executes on web server, but they are not supposed to use by end user directly in browser. They don't have any user interface. They provide services to other application. In short, it is a functionality available over internet or intranet which you can use in your application development. These types of services can be developed as XML web services or WCF services. The most important advantage of web services are they are independent of any platform, technology or language. That means web services created in .NET can be easily consumed in Java application. Windows Store application are new types of VNet applications with macro interface. The most interesting thing over here is WinStore makes your application available to millions of customers around the world. You write your app once, set the price in your local currency, and Windows Store can make it available in worldwide marketplace in 100 plus languages. It makes easy to distribute, update and get paid for apps that you develop. Fine. After discussing various frequently asked questions, now it's right time to dive deep in .NET. .NET Framework provides foundation for modern application development. .NET Framework have two core components, Common Language Runtime and Framework Class Library. CLR is runtime environment to execute .NET applications. That means it is responsible to execute all .NET applications. It also do various important tasks like exception handling, garbage collection and just-in-time compilation. In easy words, CLR executes .NET applications and also do various execution related tasks. FCL makes developers' life easy by providing huge library of functionality. It increases developer productivity and reduces development time. This library consists of hundreds of classes, interfaces, structures, delegates, which application developer can use for application development. Now you might got a big question in your mind that what is this execution engine? In C, C++, VB 6.0 we didn't have any execution engine. Then why we need it in .NET? To find out answer for this question, we have to understand difference between traditional compilation and .NET compilation. .NET compilation is different than traditional language compilation. In traditional languages, source code directly get compiled to binary executable. For example, if we have C source code, obviously C compiler will compile it to machine code. This machine code is nothing but binary code which will be executed by operating system itself. Always remember that this machine code will be always operating system dependent. If we are compiling this program on Windows XP machine, this machine code will be generated for Windows OS and which will not be executable on Linux or Mac OS. Also, it is always optimized for that particular hardware. Means if we are compiling this program on P4 processor, then this machine code will be optimized for P4 processor and will not give optimum performance on i5 processor. But in case of .NET, scenario is little different. For example, if we have C# source code, C# compiler will compile it to something known as CIL and not in binary. Obviously, CIL file can't be executed by operating system as operating system doesn't understand it. The CLR comes in picture. One of the component of CLR, that is JIT compiler, will compile your CIL code to machine code. And this will be executed by CLR and not directly by operating system. Assembly is said to be basic building block of .NET and it consists of meta information and CIL. On previous slide we have seen that when we compile source code, assembly file get created and all your source code get converted in common interface language and not in machine code. In addition to CIL, assembly also have meta information, which is information about assembly. It consists of assembly manifest, type metadata, and resources. As assembly have meta information, they are often referred as self-descriptive. Assembly is said to be basic building block of .NET, as all classes of FCL physically resides in some assembly. We know FCL is class library of huge classes. All these classes are physically resides in some DLL, which is nothing but assembly file. It means all these DLLs are not in machine code but it in CL. In short, all framework class library DLLs are in CIL and not in machine code, and physically these files are known as assembly files. Assemblies can be categorized in two types, private and public. This can be discussed in separate session. For now, you can keep in mind that all framework class library assemblies are public assemblies, and the assemblies that application developer creates after compiling the code are always by default private. Assembly manifest contains of all the information about assembly, like author of assembly, assembly name, assembly version, security key, and references to other assemblies on which this assembly is dependent. Let us discuss last point in more detail. When you write applications, you use various classes from framework class library for development. In able to call these classes, you first need to add references of assemblies or DLLs in which these classes resides to the project. After compiling this project, assembly will get created and all the references which we have used in this project development will get stored in assembly manifest. Metadata is information about all types that you have created in your assembly. For example, if you have created employee class with some fields and methods, all this information like name of class, members and methods in that class will be recorded in metadata. Resources is optional part. If you are using some multimedia file in your project, then references to that file will be stored in resources. And the most important part is CIL, Common Intermediate Language. When you compile your project, your source code will get converted to Common Intermediate Language by language compiler. CIL is also frequently referred as MSIL or IL. MSIL is acronym for Microsoft Intermediate Language. CIL is very much similar to assembly language but is object oriented. JIT compiler always use CIL as a source and compile it to machine language. This approach gives us two advantages: platform independence and language independence. To understand platform independence, we should first understand what is platform. Platform can be defined as resources required to develop and execute the applications. Platform typically includes hardware architecture and software frameworks. Platforms are broadly categorized as development platform and production platform. In case of .NET, development platform comprises of Windows operating system, .NET framework, any .NET programming language, IDE to write applications. Fortunately, we need not to install all these components separately. When you install Visual Studio 2012, all above components get installed automatically. While on production platform, we need Windows operating system and .NET framework. That's it. Now consider this scenario to understand platform independence. Say developer is writing application in C# on development platform. When he will compile the C# code using C# compiler, it will get compiled to CIL and will create assembly with .exe extension. Obviously, for this application development, we have used various classes from framework class library. References to all these classes will get stored in meta information. Now we wanted to deploy this assembly on client's machine, but for that, on client's machine there should be Windows operating system and .NET framework installed. Then you will deploy this assembly on client's machine. When client will execute this assembly, CLR will start its working. Assembly loader of CLR will load this exe and all referenced assemblies from FCL using meta information of the assembly. Then JIT compiler will compile CIL code into machine language, and this code will be executed by CLR. Very important point to note here is that the compilation from CIL to machine code is happening on client's computer. So this machine code will be optimum for client's hardware and operating system. That's why it doesn't matter on what platform application is developed, as executable code will always generate on client's machine. This is what platform independence is. Now let us try to understand language independence. As you are very much familiar with compilation of .NET, your C# code will be compiled by C# compiler into CIL, and then JIT compiler will convert into native code at the time of execution. Similarly, if we have VB.NET code, VB.NET compiler will compile it to CIL, and then same way it will get compiled by JIT compiler into native code. Same thing is true about all other .NET languages like F#, C++, .NET or any third-party language. So it should be very clear to us that .NET language compiler are designed such a way that they will generate exactly identical CIL for same logic written in different languages. For example, if you will write program to add two numbers in C# and also in VB.NET, obviously source code will be different. For example, in C# you will declare variables as int number1, comma number2, while in VB.NET you will declare them as an dim number1, comma number2 as an integer. But when you will compile both the programs, and if you will compare the CIL, you will find they are exactly identical. Summary is that CLR or JIT compiler is nothing to do with in what language you are writing your code. It will always get input as an CIL and will always generate output as an native code or machine code. This is what language independence in .NET. More than that, you can also use DLL created by your friend in VB.NET in your C# project, as DLL created in VB.NET also get compiled in CIL, and your C# source code will also get compiled in CIL after first compilation. And in second compilation, actual linking will take place. Here your exe and your friend's DLL will be loaded in memory and will get converted into machine code by JIT for execution. This means you can use DLL created in any .NET language in any other .NET language. This feature is known as language interoperability. Now you may be surprised that why Microsoft provides supports to multiple languages to work on .NET. The very true answer is to maximize the acceptance of .NET in market. The original language created by Microsoft to work with .NET is C#. Obviously, it is best choice for fresher to work on .NET framework.
but it is not obvious choice for experienced developer. For example, when Microsoft launched .NET, thousands of developers were working on VB 6.0 and they were happy with it. If Microsoft could be provided only C# as .NET language, then these people would not be interested in migrating to .NET, as we know the pain of learning new programming language. That's why Microsoft provided VB.NET as a .NET language with very much similar syntax to VB 6.0. But VB.NET internally nothing to do with VB 6.0, as VB.NET use FCL for development and get compiled into CIL and not in binary. But at least it reduces the learning curve of VB developer to work on .NET framework. Now VB developer need not to learn C# syntax to work on .NET framework. Same thing is true for all other languages. This way, Microsoft have removed the constraint of programming language and have increased the acceptance of .NET in market dramatically. Fine. Now with all these concepts in mind, it's right time to go more deep in .NET framework architecture. This diagram will give you a complete picture of where .NET framework resides and how it works in context of other Microsoft technologies like COM, IIS and Windows operating system. Here you can see that at the core there is operating system. Unmanaged applications like C, C++ or VB 6.0 COM components directly execute on operating system. There is a runtime or CLR layer on operating system and managed applications, that is .NET applications, execute on this runtime. Managed applications we developed using .NET Framework class library, and we can also use classes from custom class library. Custom class library is nothing but DLLs created by developer itself. For example, we can have employee class library project to be used in employee management application. More than that, you can use COM components in your managed application using COM interoperability. There is one more layer on OS, that is IIS, Internet Information Service. IIS is web server to host web applications. ASP.NET Runtime, which is subset of CLR, works on top of IIS. And managed web application, that is web applications built in ASP.NET, executes over ASP.NET Runtime, which is in turn hosted by IIS. So this diagram have built up good understanding where actual CLR and FCL resides in your computer. Now let us examine CLR and FCL in great details. To make our discussion easy, let us use stack representation of .NET Framework. As we know, .NET Framework have two main components, FCL and CLR. Now, again same definition that we already seen, but this time I am sure that the definition is more meaningful for you. CLR is commercial implementation of CLI. CLI stands for Common Language Infrastructure. It is an international standard for creating execution engines. It means it defines rules to be followed by execution engine. We can say that language independence is possible in .NET only because CLR follows all the rules specified by CLI. Now let us have a look on other important components of CLR, that is JIT, CLS, CTS, CAS and garbage collector. JIT stands for just-in-time compilation. Just-in-time compilation means compiling code just at the time of execution. This means that instead of compiling entire code in machine language, JIT compiler compiles code as and when it gets called. This way, it reduces the startup time of application. And more than that, it caches the compiled code, so that If same code will get called again in somewhere in program, then it use that cached copy and no need to compile that code again. This way JIT compiler avoids compiling same code again, and also it never compile the part of code which is never used in the application. CLS stands for Common Language Specification. It defines the specification or rules that has to be followed by all .NET languages. This way, it enhances and ensures language interoperability. It defines set of features of language that are widely available in various languages. Common type system is subset of CLS and defines set of data types for CLS, or in easy word, it defines data types for all .NET languages. Each and every data type of .NET language has to map with one of the data type of CTS. For example, int of C# or integer of VB.NET both map to CTS data type int32. Summary is CLS and CTS ensures the language interoperability by providing language rules to be followed and standard data types to be implemented by all .NET languages. Code access security assigns permission to code depending on source, means from where we have downloaded that code. For example, if we have downloaded the code from internet from unknown publisher, cache will treat it as a partially trusted application and will not allow to access all the resources of your system, even user have all the rights. Whereas application downloaded from internet will be treated as fully trusted and can enjoy all the rights of user. That means it can access all the resources for which user have rights. Garbage collector is responsible to destroy all unreferenced objects from the heap. The advantage of garbage collector is application developer need not to worry about memory deallocation. For example, in C, C++, you destroy objects by using functions like dalloc or free. Disadvantage of this approach is that you can easily forget to deallocate the object, which can cause memory leaks. As we discussed earlier, FCL is library of hundreds of classes, interfaces, structures, delegates that application developer can use in his application development. But as there are hundreds of classes, finding out one can be very difficult. But fortunately, all these classes are categorized properly using namespaces. Using namespaces, classes are logically grouped as per their functionality. For example, all database classes are in system.data namespace. Namespaces also plays important role to avoid name conflicts. You can have two classes with same name in different namespaces. Now let us have a look on some important subcategories of .NET Framework class library. To make things easy to understand, let us see the incremental development of .NET Framework starting from version 2.0. In 2005, Microsoft released .NET Framework 2.0, and this was a typical representation of .NET Framework 2.0 stack. Base class library consists of classes which are useful in various types of applications like console, Windows, or web applications. Whereas ADO.NET is set of classes which allow you to communicate with different types of data stores. Application developer can use ADO.NET classes to write database applications. WinForms provides architecture and controls to create desktop applications. ASP.NET is a server-side web application framework designed for web development to produce dynamic web pages. ASP.NET is built on common language runtime, allowing programmers to write ASP.NET code using any supported .NET language like C# or VB.NET. ASP.NET consists of web forms and XML web services. ASP.NET Web Forms provides layer of abstraction to develop web pages. This means developer can create web pages quickly without knowing much about HTTP, HTML, CSS and JavaScript. It also allows you to create and deploy web services very easily. At this point, you can consider web services as a web method with some functionality hosted on web server which can be used in any application development. The best thing about web services is that they can be consumed in any other technology. For example, we can write web services in .NET and can consume in Java applications. In 2006, Microsoft released .NET Framework 3.0. It is nothing but extension over 2.0. You can use WPF to create graphically rich application without using any third-party graphic tool. For example, in WinForms, if you wanted to use some graphics like with 3D effects and shadow, then you need to take help of tools like Photoshop or CorelDRAW. While WPF provides all these features in framework itself. With WPF, Microsoft introduces new declarative language to write user interface known as XAML. It is acronym for Extensible Markup Language. WCF stands for Windows Communication Foundation. It is framework to build service-oriented application. In last 20 years, various technologies are developed to be able to use remote functionality in the applications. Some of important are COM, COM+, .NET Remoting, and XML web services. These technologies are developed to solve specific problem in real life. For example, if you wanted .NET to .NET communication, .NET Remoting is best choice. Whereas, when you want platform independency and you wanted to use .NET functionality in Java, then XML web service is best option. So for different scenario, you have to learn different technologies. WCF solved this problem by combining features of web services, remoting, MSMQ, and COM+. In short, it is unified programming model to develop service-oriented applications. Windows Workflow Foundation provides declarative framework for building applications and service logic and gives developer high-level language for handling asynchronous, parallel tasks and other complex processing. WF provides set of tools for declaring workflows to define logic and control flow. In short, WF is about using higher level language for writing applications with the goal of making developers more productive, applications easier to manage and change quicker to implement. Card space is retired technology which was introduced in .NET Framework 3.0 to store digital identity. For example, to store ID and password. Microsoft discontinued card space from Feb 2011 and currently working on replacement called uProof. In 2007, Microsoft released version 3.5. In 2007, Microsoft released .NET Framework 3.5. LINQ stands for Language Integrated Query. We know that most of the real-life applications use database to store data. But surprisingly, for the years, we didn't have any support in programming language to communicate with databases. To communicate with databases, we have to always rely on structured query language, that is SQL. With the introduction of LINQ, you can write queries in C# or VB.NET language itself. LINQ is not only limited to databases. LINQ can also be used over any type of collections, even on XML files. While writing queries in LINQ, we get various advantages of Visual Studio that was missing in case of SQL queries. For example, IntelliSense and compile time validation. In ASP.NET 3.5, new server controls are added and also introduces ASP.NET Ajax. Ajax stands for Asynchronous JavaScript and XML. It is a technique developed by various web programmers to get desktop-like experience on web pages, that is flicker-free pages. In .NET Framework 3.5, there are also various enhancements in common language runtime, enhancements in WPF, WCF, networking, Windows Forms, etc. In 2008, Microsoft released .NET Framework 3.5 Service Pack 1. Entity Framework is Object Relational Mapping System. Microsoft describes Entity Framework as object relational mapper that enables .NET developer to work with relational data using domain-specific objects. It eliminates the need for most of the data access code that developers usually need to write. First time when I used dynamic data, I was really amazed. You just need to drag and drop some database table and your website is ready. Yes, scaffolding feature creates and designs pages for all your tables dynamically. It automatically inserts label, text boxes, drop-down lists depending on table schema. It provides save, update, delete, find buttons. More than that, scaffolding also understands relationship between tables and design pages accordingly. It's simply a great tool to create websites in minutes. In 2010, Microsoft released .NET Framework 4.0 with some new features like TPL, P-Link, MVC, and PCL. TPL stands for Task Parallel Library. Day by day, processors are becoming more powerful. Today, even basic computers also have multi-core processors. Making use of these multi-core processors in applications is a new challenge for developers. Using system.threading to create multi-threaded application is one solution, but it has its own complexities. While TPL is a simplified solution and designed specially for multi-core processors, TPL is smart enough to make optimum use of all available processors on client machine. Starting with .NET Framework 4, the TPL is preferred way to write multi-threaded and parallel code. Parallel link is parallel implementation of link to objects. MVC stands for Model View Controller. This is a new approach to develop web applications. We have seen that in very first version of .NET, Microsoft have introduced ASP.NET Web Forms. Web Forms made web development very easy by providing various server controls and hiding HTML, JavaScript, CSS from web developer. But this convenience comes with cost of performance and manageability. Web forms have their own limitations. Some of the disadvantages of web forms are complex page lifecycle, use of view state, heavy server controls, no support for unit testing, automated JavaScript creation. Now with the invent of libraries like jQuery, CSS3, HTML5, using JavaScript and CSS is again becoming trend. That's why web forms are not right choice to develop modern web applications. ASP.NET MVC overcomes all the limitations of web forms. It gives powerful pattern-based way to build dynamic websites that enables clean separation of concerns. It also gives you full control over markup. ASP.NET MVC includes many features that enables fast, test-driven development for creating sophisticated applications that use latest web standards. The Portable Class Library project enables you to write and build managed assemblies that work on more than one .NET Framework platform. You can use this project to write and build portable assemblies that work without modifications on multiple platforms such as Windows 7, Windows 8, Silverlight, Windows Phone and Xbox 360. In 2012, Microsoft have released latest version of Microsoft.NET, that is version 4.5. Windows Store app is new type of app that can be sold on Windows Store and can run on Windows 8 devices. They run in single window that fills the entire screen by default. They automatically work with variety of input sources like touch, pen, mouse and keyboard, etc. Instead of static icons, they use live tiles that can display notifications even when the program is not running. HTML5 is a new standard of HTML. Its core aim have been to improve the language with support for the latest multimedia. For example, HTML5 includes system for embedding videos without any plugin like Adobe Flash. It also includes touch events, geolocations, etc. With CSS3, you can do advanced styling which was not possible in older versions. For example, you can create rounded borders, add shadow to boxes and use an image as a border. And it's all possible without using any design program like Photoshop. jQuery is powerful JavaScript library. using jQuery, you can easily do validations, animations without directly using JavaScript. Typically, web works on request response model. Limitation of this model is server can only respond to the client request. There is no mature way so that server can send data to client without any client request. HTML5 WebSocket addresses this issue by providing a channel between client and server. WebSocket provides persistent connection between the client and server so that both parties can start sending data at any time. This is high level and I will say incomplete representation of .NET Framework 4.5. There are many other components which you can add to this diagram, but at a beginner level I think this is enough. We have just seen incremental development of FCL in different versions. Same way, we should also understand different versions of CLR and their side-by-side execution. As we know, Microsoft launched .NET Framework 1.0 in 2002. In this version, FCL and CLR both are in version 1.0 itself. As it was first released, there were a lot of bugs in it, which Microsoft fixed, and immediately in 2003 they have launched stable version 1.1. In 2005, Microsoft released .NET Framework 2.0. Up to this, you can see that version of CLR is also upgrading with version of Framework class library. But after 2.0, Microsoft released 3.0, which was not standalone version, but it is just extension over .NET Framework 2.0. And a version of CLR is same, that is CLR 2.0. This means if you will install Framework 3.5 on any system, it will first install Framework 2.0, then 3.0, and then 3.5 extensions. Then in 2010, Microsoft released .NET Framework 4.0. This version is standalone and not extension like 3.0 and 3.5. In this release, version of both FCL and CLR is 4.0. In 2012, Microsoft releases latest version, that is 4.5. This version is also standalone with version 4.5 of both FCL and CLR. The advantage of extension approach in 3.0 and 3.5 is any application developed in Framework 2.0 can also execute on the system where 3.5 is installed, because 2.0 Framework class library is already there. But what if you have some applications in .NET 1.1, some in 2.0 and some in 4.0? Then you have to install all the three versions of .NET Framework. Installation of multiple versions of .NET on same computer is possible. This feature is known as side-by-side execution. When you will execute .NET 1.1 application, it will automatically execute using CLR 1.1. When you will execute .NET 2.0 application, it will execute using CLR 2.0. And same way, .NET 4 application will execute in CLR 4.0. One very important thing you should be aware of that side-by-side installation of .NET Framework 4.0 and 4.5 is not possible. When you will install .NET Framework 4.5, it will simply replaces the version 4.0 on your computer. All the applications developed in 4.0 executes in 4.5. .NET 4.0 onwards, there is also support for in-process side-by-side execution. That means, in one process, multiple versions of CLR can be loaded. For example, if you are executing .NET 4.5 application, but in that application some 2.0 component is used, then to execute that component, CLR 2.0 will get loaded in same process automatically. In the end, let us have a look on this definition again. The .NET Framework is an execution and development platform for building apps for Windows, Windows Phone, Windows Server and Windows Azure. I hope now the definition is making some sense for you. With this, I would like